Welcome back to KPS Stories. This is the last episode of the season. Tune in next semester for Bigfoot Part 2. I'm your co-host, Kayla.
I'm your host, Steve, here with my very special friend, Max.
Hello.
All right, so we're here to answer the question, is Keystone College haunted? Now, Max, I know you lived on campus for 2 years. Do you have any stories from Moffat, for example, that you want to share with the KPS faithful?
I have way too many stories about Moffat. There have been a couple deaths in Moffat, and there were always rumors about which room it happened in. And every rumor seemed to point to, of course, the room that I had. It was on the bottom floor, in the basement side. So our room was 1, 2, 3, I think, something like that. They all look the same. They're all dungeons. But yeah, we always had a lot of weird stuff going on. It kind of started right away, honestly. I have a couple stories. Should I start, you think, with the whiteboard one?
Yeah, whatever you think's best.
The whiteboard one is pretty wild. So we had, like every other freshman has when they first move in and they decide to be quirky and cool and responsible and decorate, we had a whiteboard on a door. It's like a rite of passage for college. And I guess whoever was in the suite with us that we could not see did not like the whiteboard. She's like, y'all are basic. This is stupid. And it kept falling. Like, just regular falling, as if it's like, you know, bad tacky tape or whatever. And that was completely fine. Like, whatever. We're not thinking anything of it. So we just pick it up and we put it back in place. And it kept falling. It kept fucking falling. We kept buying command strips and everything and replacing them. I think at one point we used, like, Gorilla Tape because we're over this shit. And I remember one day when I was doing classes online, I was always the type of person where I always had the door open so that people could just, like, come up and, like, you know, pop in, say hi, whatever. It was always my thing. And so I'm just on my laptop, and out of the corner of my eye, I see something fly, and then I hear a loud, like, bang and rattle and slide. And the whiteboard that was on the door, it fell, but it didn't, like, just fall straight down. It somehow flew across the fucking suite. And it slid and landed at the door opposite of ours, which is, like, a good, like, 20 feet away. It freaked me out because it's not like it just fell. It looked like something, like flung it off of the door because it didn't go straight down. It flew. It was the weirdest thing ever. And from that moment, I was like, okay, you know what? You win. We're gonna keep it down. We're done with the whiteboard. You know, we had a bunch of, like, little stuff too where scratches, like, that you could hear that weren't, like, mice or rats or anything. It was just, like, it sounded like it was against the wall in the room. The lights would always dim just out of nowhere randomly when the rest of the suite would be completely fine. Because we had the dimmable lights, we wouldn't touch the knob or anything. It would just, like, go all the way down and then all the way back up in, like, a weird rhythm back and forth. Only room that had that issue. I have another one, but it's kind of long.
That's why we're here. Go ahead.
Okay. This one happened actually the first week that I was in Moffat. My roommate, she was away. She had volleyball practice, which I don't know if it's still on the same schedule here, but it used to go from, like, 9 to 11 or something like that. She was gone for a good 3 hours late at night for most nights. And so I had the room to myself, and I was winding down. I had skier skis 8 a.m. the next morning, so I had to get to bed early. But so I'm getting in bed, and the lights are off. I'm under the covers, trying to get cozy, and I just had the feeling that I wasn't alone, that there was something else chilling with me. It wasn't anything necessarily bad. You know, it was just kind of neutral. Like, I could tell that I wasn't entirely alone. And so, you know, I've always been kind of in tune with stuff like this, so, because I've lived in plenty of haunted areas before. So I was just talking, because apparently it was like a suicide that happened on our floor. And so I said, if this is you, I'm so sorry. I understand that this is your space and I'm respectful of it. I think that we can coexist peacefully, and I'm so sorry. This is your space. I'm only here for a little while. And then I go to bed, and not even 2 minutes later, not even that. I don't think it was like instant almost. I just hear a quick bang, bang, bang on the window. And it scared the living shit out of me for a few reasons. Now, I went through this to try to debunk it because I'm not the type to think, ooh, something slightly weird happened. Ghosts! Like, that's not me. That's not me at all. So, I was wondering if it was maybe somebody outside because we were on the bottom floor. You could, like, go up to our window just walking behind the building. I was wondering if maybe it was somebody just, pulling a prank, being a dick. No, because on the first floor, they were all barred. They all had, like, the metal cage kind of in front of the glass so that you couldn't climb in and out of the windows. And if somebody had hit that, it would make that distinct metal rattle sound. I know because I went and I tried it the next morning. Completely different sound. It also could not have been my roommate somehow fucking with me because it was only around 10 o'clock. She wasn't due to be back for like an hour and a half. And I, went to the window the next morning and tried to figure out what exactly was, like, making that noise, try to replicate it. And it was knocking on the glass from the inside of the room. There was no way it could have been from the outside. I did it, and like I said, it was a rapid 3 times, 1, 2, 3. And the freaky part about that is that it was, like, not even 5 feet from my head. And it was on the inside of the room. So they definitely made their presence known. That was the craziest experience that I had at Moffat. Like I said, I've had a few like small ones, but I'm so used to it because I've lived in a haunted house before that it's like, whatever. They're just chilling. But this one was freaky because I just straight up was not expecting it. It was probably the most active instance I've had in years. Really, really weird.
Yeah, I had a pretty weird experience in Moffat one time, but it's not a ghost story, actually. It was early in my career as a respected campus safety officer, and we get a call that the fire alarm's going off in Moffat. So I was brand new at this job, and the guy who was training me, Uncle Dave, says to me, "Oh, we got to go down and see what this is. The SRA just called, fire alarm, smoke detector, whatever." So we get down there, and she's standing outside the building. And she just goes, "You guys got to go in there and see it for yourself." So I look at Uncle Dave, and he just shrugs and says, "You're brand new. You need the experience. Why don't you go in, and I'll back you up from out here." Okay. So I go in the panel room and shut off the fire alarm and all that. And it tells me, like, which suite the disturbance is in. And it's a guy's suite. Okay, it's the first warning sign. I open the door, and there's just baby powder everywhere in this room. It's dudes holding bottles of Johnson & Johnson baby powder. And they had been blasting each other with this baby powder. And what I remember most clearly, there's like 3 or 4, spent empty bottles of this on the floor. And there's this dude on the floor, like, his arms are wrapped around a pillow, and he's giggling, like, gleefully, and he's covered in baby powder. And as I was opening the door, like 4 dudes were just blasting him with more, and he's like rolling around in it. And I opened the door, and they all just froze. And the fucking fire alarm is still going off because they set it off again. And I look down at the guy on the floor, and he just looks up at me with watery eyes and just smiles at me. And I just said to them, I was like, "Guys, I don't need an explanation. I don't want an explanation. Just don't set off the fire alarm again." And I walked out, and I told Uncle Dave what I had seen. And he basically just told me, "Welcome to Keystone." It's like, these are 18-year-olds. A lot of them are still experimenting. And he said, "You just kind of you'll get used to it." It's basically what he told me. Now, I had other interesting Moffat encounters. There was the time the SRA calls me because a bird was stuck in the building. So to any of my wildlife fans out there, it's a gray catbird. And it's a mockingbird, okay? So the poor dude is stuck in the lobby of Moffat on a summer night. It's like me and this bird and my coworker and the SRA are the only people on campus. And we had to like corral this poor guy out the window. That was an interesting one that I didn't expect. You know, there's so many good Moffat stories. Are they ghost stories? Oh, the people in there are zombies, so that's close enough. There was one time this guy who lived off campus, we'll just call him Tony, was dating this girl in Moffat. And they had a fight, like, you know, it wasn't working out, whatever. So he was coming out of her room one night, and he was drunk, and he was pissed off. And he just jumped up in the air and grabbed the exit sign and dashed it off the ground. Chunks of plastic went flying everywhere. You know, hit him right in the face. There's blood everywhere. Disaster. But I think there's so much tension. There's so much angst in that building. There's so much black mold in that building.
Oh, God, don't start. Don't start on the black mold, please.
And all these things are just like, it's just a confluence of negative energy, is the way I would describe Moffat to someone that hasn't been there, or someone that is there now. I mean,
it's a nightmare. They need to tear that building down and start fresh, man. It's so bad. It's an absolute nightmare. That was the worst year of my college experience, was living in that fucking moldy dungeon. Oh my God. I don't miss this place nearly as much as I think sometimes. All it takes is like remembering what it was like walking into Moffat, and I'm cured. And then it's like, oh yeah, it's a good thing I transferred. Like, yeah, we upgraded.
All it takes is 5 minutes of being in the studio to remember what it was really like. Like, when you're away, you come up with this idealized vision of how it was. But then that is dispelled very quickly.
And you get here and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
basically.
Like, what were we thinking? What was going on?
Yeah, no, Moffat was a dark period of time. I don't know. It's like all the goons of this campus end up in Moffat somehow. It's like they know, and they're like, you know what? We're just going to isolate them. We're going to push them to the farthest reach of campus, like before you get to, like, you know, down in Factoryville. And we're going to pretend that they don't exist, because you know they're not going to class. They just exist in their rooms or smoking down by the creek, and that's all that they're in college for. That's it. I remember somebody one time, they tried to start like a fucking war between the dorm buildings. It was the dumbest thing ever. It's like, yeah, you can do that at universities, like, because then it's like, yeah, like there's a bunch of people, but it's like you're starting beef between like there's less than 1,000 kids that live on campus, and you're trying to start beef with each other. It's not gonna work. But like, they used to set off the fire alarms at like the ass crack of dawn, or at like 2 a.m. Mind you, also in the dead of winter. They couldn't even be like courteous and wait till like fucking spring or something. No, they did this while it was snowing outside. And like, one time somebody from Holland's Head, I think, from those two, they came down to Moffat. I don't know how they got in. I'm not going to question it. But they posted on their Snapchat story a video of them microwaving a pack of ramen with no water. And the caption just said, "Fuck Moffat," as it just went up in flames and filled the upstairs lobby with smoke. It was the dumbest fucking thing. I fucking hated living there, man. Like, the only good thing is that we had AC, but my AC was filled with black mold. We need to get off of Moffat. We need to get off of Moffat before I get, like, legitimately angry. That was such a bad time.
So you mentioned living in haunted houses before. Maybe you want to tell us some ghost stories from Connecticut.
Oh, God.
So Max is from Connecticut.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes, I am. Hence why I go to school out here, to try to get the hell away from that place. But yeah. I'm trying to think of, because I have a lot of the best one to, like, narrow it down to. Probably when I lived in a town called Bloomfield. It's mostly rural. It's outside of Hartford. My grandfather actually grew up in this house. He was born in the house. And so, as far as I remember, that was what my parents told me, at least. If that's actually factual or not, I don't know. My mom likes to tell stories. But so, when my grandfather passed away, instantly there was, like, you could tell that he wasn't gone. He was still absolutely there. And so, I actually, when we moved in to take care of my grandmother, because my grandmother had developed dementia, and we moved in to take care of her, I got the room that used to be my grandfather's, along with a bunch of his other siblings. It was packed. But so, it was his growing up, and, like, whenever I would stay over, because I stayed a lot of weekends at their house, that was the room that I stayed in too. And so I just always thought of it as, you know, my grandfather's room. And I remember never being able to go in there without having music on. And back then I didn't really understand it. I used to describe it as, oh, it feels crowded in here. Or, oh, I don't want it to be quiet. I don't, you know, never because I feared the energy in the room, but just, like, you know, as like a 7-8-year-old kid, it's overwhelming, you know, to be surrounded by something that you don't really have an explanation for. So I used to have a radio literally right next to my door when I walked in. So the lights would get flipped on, the radio would get flipped on, and it would stay on 24/7 because I could not be in that room without some type of other noise to kind of disperse everything, you know, something to focus on instead of focusing on the energy. Should I tell about the Quiet Lady?
Mm-hmm.
That's an iconic one. So there was this dike in the back of our house. We had 8 acres of garden, and behind that was a man-made dike. Basically, for anybody who doesn't know, it's just to store water. It's to avoid flooding. The water, it's a man-made hill, and you can tell it's got, like, weird ridges on it, and water flows underneath it. And so I used to go back there all the time. Like, I would be outside from sunrise to sunset, mostly because I wasn't allowed inside. But I used to always go out onto the dike and just walk, because it was, like, a good, like, mile and a half. And I remember one day I got into an argument with my parents, and I'm like 11, 12 at the time. It was in that range. And so, you know, I'm starting to get angsty and shit. But so I went out to the dike to just walk, get my mind off of it. And when I get up there, I see pretty far off, you know, I'd say, I don't really know the distance, but far enough that you couldn't really make out a feature, so you could just make out an outline of somebody walking on the dike with a dog. And, like, this is normal. People used to walk on the dike all the time. Like, it's a really nice trail. It's surrounded by forest, really pretty views. You get down to a retirement home at the end of it, and, you know, you can just sit and watch the wildlife. It's really gorgeous out there. So people used to walk it all the time. That's why I walked it. But I just wasn't in the mood, so you know what, like, I'm like, ugh, whatever. I don't even want to pass this lady. I'm gonna walk heading in the same direction as her, so that way we don't cross paths, and then I'm just gonna, like, cross the street, continue on the other side of the dike, and hopefully she'll be gone by then. And so, after a couple seconds, I turn around, just to see, like, not really turn around, try to do the subtle look over your shoulder, you know, like, you're not staring at this bitch, but you're trying to gauge where she's at, and she was closer to me. Like, a significant amount closer to me. And instantly I'm like this is a little uncomfy because there's no supervision out here. Anything could be happening. What if she's some weird, like, kidnapper? Who the fuck knows? 10-year-old irrational brain going. But so she's pretty close, and so I'm starting to get a little, like, uncomfortable, so I speed up. I'm doing a nice little brisk speed walk at this point, trying to keep distance between us. Her and her little fucking dog. But then I look back again after a little bit, and she's still behind me. And again, she's even closer. The freaky part about this was that the sun was hitting us directly, but I could make out no features of her face. None whatsoever. It was like she was just a walking silhouette. Like, there was nothing that I could make out of her. Of her dress that she was wearing, it looked kind of like old-fashioned. Anything. She was just a walking shadow. And she was getting closer and closer and closer. And so I'm freaking out. And I'm starting to straight up run at this point. And I glance behind my shoulder again, and she's maybe 10 feet from me. Again, I can't see a single thing. Like, I can't make out a single detail of her other than she's 10 fucking feet from me. And so I'm now full sprint. I take off my jacket while I'm running. And this shit was like a scene out of a fucking movie. Because I throw the jacket behind me to try to, like, throw her off so I could at least, like, make a mad dash down the side of the dike into the forest or something. And as I throw it and I'm looking back, as the jacket falls, she's gone. Completely gone. No sign of her whatsoever. And my blood just runs cold. And the grass on the dike was kind of long, so you could see footprints in it. There were no footprints from her or from a stupid fucking dog. And I was so freaked out because I was like, where did she go? She had been following me for like a minute. She was right up on my ass, and now she's gone. And so I, like, eventually started to get worried. I was like, well, what if she maybe fell or something like that? Because sometimes the residents of the retirement home down at the end of it, they would walk the dike. Maybe she's, not very able-bodied and she fell and she needs help. So I started to walk around the area where we were and, like, call out, like, do you need help? Hello? And I even went into the outskirts of the forest to try to look for her, and nothing whatsoever. And it was the weirdest, freakiest thing I have ever fucking experienced. Instant dread the second that I realized that she wasn't even there the entire time. I don't know. I gave her this nickname, the Quiet Lady, because I just felt, because that's the thing, you couldn't hear her footsteps, and that's just why I've been calling her since it happened when I was really young. And I couldn't call her the Silent Lady, even though that's what my brain went to, because it just felt too hostile. I almost felt threatened out of calling her the Silent Lady, so it's always been the Quiet Lady. Whenever I retell that story. My ma still thinks I'm full of shit whenever I tell this story. But I swear up and down by it, it was by far the weirdest and scariest thing that has really ever happened to me as far as that house goes. And as far as, like, Connecticut stories go.
Damn, that's a scary story. Yeah, so from Connecticut to Moffat Hall, sometimes the paranormal follows us wherever we go. You should follow the KPS on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube today for more terrifying content just like this. That's all we got for you guys today. Max, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
And we'll see everybody on the next episode of KPS Stories Podcast.